Welcome back to my garden. I was away last week, hence no video. My old school in Sao Paulo invited me back for their Arts Week, an annual event, and I was one of a number of artists who gave guest classes, in my case teaching some basic wire sculpture techniques, which was a lot of fun, and everyone seemed very pleased. So that was fantastic, and actually, if I'm being totally honest, well, I got paid as well, and that's took the pressure off the art sales side of things for this year. Anyway, I'm back here, life moves on, and actually this week's talk is a sort of lead on from something else I did there in Sao Paulo, which was delivered an assembly on, well, I suppose what by now we can simply call the 10,000 hours rule, although as I and many others have discussed, there is no such thing as a 10,000 hours rule per se, but it's an idea that was, that phrase, popularized at Anders Ericsson's idea of deliberate practice, and then the notion that 10,000 hours seems to be a nice rule of thumb for how long it takes to gain real mastery of a complex skill, sort of world-class mastery. Whatever world-class means, and that's where the whole notion of 10,000 hours falls down, because it's just, these are just arbitrary categories. But the idea is pretty clear, and certainly one that I've discussed a lot, and discussed a lot in this series. But talking to children, it's obvious what the stumbling block is. It's just the sheer enormity of 10,000 hours. And I've been discussing the notion of resistance as outlined by Stephen Pressfield. And I think that nagging, annoying little negative voice at the back of our head, one of its common tactics is to say that you can't do this thing that you want to do because, well, quite simply, you don't have enough time. And it's true to some extent, very often. If I wanted to play guitar just like Segovia, well, I don't have enough time. I simply, if I counted up all available hours for the rest of my life, I couldn't spend the time that he spent playing the guitar. So I'm out of time. But obviously that's not what people mean when they rail against 10,000 hours and it takes too damn long. And I don't really want to do it anyway. I guess if we were to sort of sum it up, the problem is making a commitment which might be for somewhere between 5 and 10 years, depending on how much time you do have available, perhaps even 20. And that seems like a very long time to commit to anything. Of course, people don't say that when they are in the early years of high school and have a dream of becoming a doctor, because it will take them, you're 15, it's going to take you 10 years. It's going to take you thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of practice. But it's a kind of mapped out path, and it makes sense. It's plausible, believable, because people just like you, people you know, your cousins or friends of the family, became doctors, and if they did it, why can't you? But when we talk about the more extreme sorts of activities, well, it's harder to find an obvious local connection. I came across a video this week of another person who's done a truly remarkable thing. He's the 10th, and I've spoken about something similar before, but this one's a neater version of the story. Tom Turchich, I probably massacred his name, but there we are, something like that. Chap from New Jersey, USA, and he recently completed a truly astonishing feat, one of only 10 people to have done so, it would appear, in the history of our wonderful little planet. what inspired him to do this feat. I'm building it up, creating tension. I'm not sure if that's a good thing to do in these videos, but it's what I'm doing this week, so there. When he was 16, he was leading a very normal 16-year-old life in a prosperous little town in New Jersey. The world lay ahead of him, and then disaster struck. A very close friend, Anne-Marie, was killed in a jet ski accident, sort of freak accident, and it really drove home to him the fragility of life, and it could all be over very quickly, which is a sort of thought that might plague teenagers, adolescents, sort of existential angst that might strike you down. But he resolved that his life wouldn't be wasted, and what he really wanted to do was travel. And there and then, he sort of set his mind on walking around the world. He ended up going to university, but he never let go of his plans, and he was planning. And he did a few jobs, and eventually his adventure crystallized. He got a sponsor, and in 2015 he started. He left New Jersey, walking south, somewhere in Texas. He picked up a friend, a stray dog called Savannah, and 7 or 8 years later, he arrived back in his hometown to tremendous fanfare, having completed a 28,000-mile journey. And as I say, one of only 10 people to have done so. Now, that is well beyond the 10,000 hours. I mean, he wasn't walking every day. It's looking at his YouTube channel, it was less than 2,000 days, but he was walking 20 to 24 miles a day. So an enormous undertaking, and well beyond the 10,000 hours. Not that it's deliberate practice, but it was the hours necessary to build up that remarkable achievement rather than a remarkable complex skill. Although he, no doubt, built up an enormous number of skills along the way. And then strangely, having come across this just in one of my internet feeds, I came across 2 TED Talks on the exact opposite. One was a chap, I think Max Boyd, Scottish gentleman by the sounds of it, his accent. And while he was procrastinating doing his engineering thesis, he decided he needed a break. He was just going out of his mind. So he set his mind to learning something that he'd always wanted to do. And this happened to be skateboarding. And he thought, well, I'm going to learn a trick. And his trick was that sort of one where you're standing on the skateboard and then you flip the skateboard 360 degrees and land on it. Which is a tremendous trick. Not something that I'm even remotely interested in doing, but I can see the appeal as something to learn to do. And he actually filmed himself while he was learning this trick. It took him not 10,000 hours. It took him, quite astonishingly, 5 hours and 47 minutes. And you'd imagine it's the sort of thing that you'd not do because it requires some sort of special gift, an enormous amount of pain and practice, pain, physical pain, falling, and mental anguish and the frustration of not being able to do this thing that seems so easy when people who've mastered the skill perform it. Well, that sort of led into, a one thing into another chain reaction. And he is now not a practicing engineer, but a professional YouTuber. And he has mastered 50 skills of a similar sort of complexity, some more, none really that much less. I mean, just looking at his B-reel, one that I just remember off the top of my head is throwing a playing card so it embeds itself in an apple. You know, and they're completely ridiculous things that he's learning to do, but that is now his job, astonishingly. And it seems that it doesn't take you, obviously, 10,000 hours to learn these, on first sight, impossible skills. And they're kind of examples of what it takes to learn, let's say, something that is much more difficult to master, and we'll stay with the classical guitar, where you learn one basic skill in what will be an enormous toolbox of skills required to have true mastery of that activity. But they're not basic skills in the sense that learning to play one chord is a basic skill. They're more like, they're the skill in, it's a microcosm of a basic skill, of a big skill. It's kind of like learning a song rather than learning a chord. And another chap, and this again popped into my feed, Robert Twigger, something like that. He talks about a Japanese concept, and by now you can tell I haven't carefully researched this video. Waza, haza, who knows? But it's an idea in the martial arts where it's a skill that is the whole universe of the martial art encapsulated in one basic thing. And this chap talks about how learning to become a chef would seem like an incredibly daunting and very long journey, but mastering omelette making essentially is mastering becoming a chef, but it's very much a mini version, and the kind of thing that you could kind of begin to tackle if you thought, I've always fancied becoming a chef. Well, embarking on the 10-year journey of becoming a chef might seem a little bit intimidating. Embarking on learning to make a damn good omelette will tell you all you need to know as to whether becoming a chef is something you might want to do. And I think that's the appeal of this for me. One of the many appeals is that when it comes to mastering something, embarking on this long, arduous journey, you need to have an idea, perhaps, the inspiration, the North Pole, North Star, of true domination of something. But it's really handy to not just begin with a simple task, but begin with an activity that is manageable in some sort of period of time, maybe 10 to 20 hours, which might equate to regular sessions every day for a month. So I think that quite early in my idea of the master of self-administration, one of the things that I would encourage anyone to do is, once you've identified an activity that might be your thing, so to speak, try and narrow it down to a mini version and give yourself a month where you decide to become good at that. And that's it. I'm back in the run of these films. Before next week, I think I'm going to watch the other ones I've done in the series, something that I probably should have done before this film but didn't, and take it from there. Otherwise, I trust your lives are filled with joy, and until next week, from sunny Brazil,